Hey, welcome to Lead Full. My name is Chesley Lunday. I am your host today. Here's the deal. We know that life, no matter how successful you are, can sometimes be an exercise in futility. And we want to help you defeat futility in your lives. We want to help you develop fulfillment, and we want to help you change the world, because we know this: when leaders are fulfilled, they fill the world with hope. Now, let's get ready to lead full. Hey, welcome back to the Lead Full podcast. I'm so excited to have a conversation with Brian Phipps today. Brian has been in ministry for like almost 3 decades. Yeah, he's kind of old. No, don't tell him I said that. No, he's great. I love him. He's become fast become one of my best friends in ministry. He's got one of the best systems for developing people that I have ever seen. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that system, but mostly we're going to talk about why he built the system. What is it about discipleship and learning how to develop people that matters, and what is the thought process behind that? Get ready for an amazing conversation with Brian Phipps of Disciples Made.
Hey guys, I am here with Brian Phipps of Disciples Made. We become fast friends over the last few weeks. It seems like.
I knew I loved you from the moment I first saw you.
I know. So we were joking around a couple weeks ago that I look like Sal from Impractical Jokers, and you look like Scott Valentine when you were growing up. The real question is, do you still look like each other?
That's just, if you want to get off on the right foot with me, let's not make jokes.
Oh,
okay. You intended to make a hair joke, but hey, dude.
Well, I kind of feel like every time somebody says I look like Sal, it's just because I'm overweight. So I feel you there. So it is what it is. So how you doing, man?
Gosh.
You doing good?
I'm doing really well. I had the privilege of hanging out with you and your team. You're bright, but the people you brought with you are really, really bright.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun.
I might be the dumbest person in the room. It's great.
Not true, man. We met, what was that, on one of Jeff Reed's deals?
Jeff Reed from the church.digital. He's got his own podcast. It's pretty cool.
Yep.
I'm one of the first national digital church planters, and so he's with Stadia Church Planting, and we did a church planting cohort. Check his podcast out. It's great. But yeah, met you there, and you just started going to town on some of the stuff that I feel like my entrepreneur buddies need to hear. And so I'm like, shoot, we should just have you on the podcast and let you go. So I'm excited.
I love how these relationships evolve, dude.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. So, man, where do you want to start? You want to start in the beginning?
Podcast.
Yeah, I know. But so there's so many questions about is Christianity relevant to my life? And obviously that is all intertwined with how we do Sunday morning services and whether or not that's good. And then you got this whole COVID thing that shut everything down, and everybody's like, I got my Sundays back. I can sit in my PJs watching, and they're like, now there's this real struggle. Now that we're headed out of COVID slowly but surely, there's going to be a lot of people that wrestle with this whole church thing and if it's relevant. I tend to think that the Bible is relevant for everyday life. I know that you do, but the real question is why. And so I would love for you just to open the floor to go, hey, you have this thing, you talk about character and calling, and character time calling equals impact. And for those of us that are high-performing, successful entrepreneur types, like creative, innovative leaders, like that's what we're searching for, right?
Well, you asked if 3 things were relevant. You started with Christianity, then you went to the church, and then you said the Bible, and then you said Jesus. So that's interesting. Those could be interpreted in 4 different ways. Like you could say, just check relevancy for this and check relevancy for this. So let me just start by saying this. Jesus is the essence of my life. I mean, Jesus, his message, his methods are the operating system from which I live. So they're not just relevant. I'm irrelevant to it. but for whatever reason, he has chosen to make me relevant to what he wants to accomplish in this world. And that has been truly my breath and life, and the reason I move, live and move, and whatever Paul says up on the Acropolis there, where we live and move and have our being, right? Yeah. He is the essence of that.
That was a Greek poet. That was a Greek poet
Yeah.
he was quoting. It wasn't even from the Bible. It was like a poet from Greece. And so pretty cool.
He was doing a thing, trying to be relevant up there on the Acropolis. But so then the Bible, let's go that one next. How relevant is that? Well, it's the means by which Jesus has allowed us the most comprehensive way to know his story, to know how he's related with people like us throughout history, in our past. It's descriptive for how we're to live. It's descriptive for how, what we are to believe. And it is a vehicle through which he does speak to us. It's authoritative for how I live and what I believe, but it's also the vehicle where he speaks to me on a regular basis and invites me to obey him. And it's through that daily obedience in that rhythm. It's not the only rhythm, but that's the one we're talking about, through which I actually see him make a difference in my life. I'm different than I was 5 years ago, and I'll get into like the specifics when I can finally get my head back around to the character and calling where you ended up. The church, here's Jesus. Yeah, he is relevance, and everything else rotates around it. Bible, it's a primary key through which Jesus allows me to experience that relevance through him. Church, I'm going to answer this in a strange way, perhaps. It is another of his preferred, methods by which we join him and partner with him to change the world. He's, I'll build my ecclesia, and on this rock, to the extent I believe that the church is living out that mission and is founded on the gospel, it is entirely relevant because Jesus doesn't create irrelevant things. Then you came back around to asking about this character and calling thing, which in my mind goes back to Jesus. How am I doing so far in answering your question?
You're doing great. Keep going. I'm enjoying this. So yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that I think I try, as a person that's answering questions on a podcast, you're always listening for the question that's behind the question and trying to answer that question, but without failing to answer the questions that you ask on the surface. It seems to me that and it's really our core message, right? Disciples Made is a ministry about helping people become great disciples. Well, what's that mean? One of the biggest problems, I believe, in the church today is we don't have a unified, simple, clarion call as to what that actually means. What is a disciple? And when are they made? What is a disciple? When are they made? For us, Disciples Made is the name is there because we want to get disciples to the point where they are made, meaning they don't need us anymore. Jesus came, he spent 2.5 years, 3.5 years, whatever the timeline is. He did whatever he needed to do to get the guys to a certain place, and then he went back to the Father. It's a limited duration. He had a specific set of outcomes in mind. Once he accomplished those outcomes, he goes back to the Father, sends the Spirit, and we have access to a Spirit to accomplish whatever it is he trained us to do in that period of time. And then he had those guys replicate it, and that's how we're at the billions that have come to follow him since then. And that's what we're trying to help kind of kick back up into gear. I personally, Chesley, believe that most of our structures that I grew up in, or most of the structures that are in America, really more are about disciples in the perpetual making. Like we kind of get afraid to get people up to our level and then not need us anymore. And so I'm going to save that for later. Like let me just toss that idea out there and then come back to it. What is a disciple? Man, this goes like this. I'm just going to go deep fast, right? So John 10:10 is really the essence of our theology of disciple making. And that's where Jesus says, he gives us a diagnosis of what's gone wrong in the world, and then he gives us hope for what to do about it. And in John 10:10, he says, the thief came to steal, kill, and destroy. And bro, I've seen his work today. You don't have to look far, right? I mean, there was a shooting last night in Texas. So there's been like 3 different shootings this week. And we ask ourselves the question, what in the world has gone wrong? What really has gone wrong? Been reading this, implementing this business strategy called Traction, right? And talks about how do you have a really effective meeting. And there's the IDS portion. It's identify, discuss, and solve. And basically what you're doing is you're trying to figure out what's the real issue. Okay, so you present the issue. Well, what's the issue behind that issue? Okay, and then, well, what's the issue behind that issue? And you keep asking that question until you get down to the very fundamental essence of the real problem. What's the real problem with humans? Jesus said the thief came and stole something from them. And he's continually stealing from them. And in doing so, he's killing he's killing them and leading them to kill each other and destroying all of humanity. So that we don't really need much more description of kind of the thief's main role there. And then Jesus does this. He says, but I came that you might have life. Like the antithesis. The thief came to mess everything up. I've come to fix it. I quickly go right to like Romans 5, where it says, through the first Adam, death came and the curse and the brokenness. But through the second Adam, Jesus, came life. So it's like Paul's just kind of doing a little extra commentary in Romans 5 on what Jesus says in John 10:10. But this really begs the question, what did the thief steal? Is that a generic? Is that just a generic observation that that's what he generally does? Or what did he steal? And you kind of know how I go down character and calling, but I've been jabbing, so why don't you just either tell me to keep going or ask a specific question?
I really like this because it sets up the foundation of really is this whole Jesus following thing relevant in the 21st century? And as somebody that is a go-getter, somebody that is a leader of men, somebody that really wants to make significance in the world, that question gets very, very hard to answer unless they understand the foundational pieces of what we see through Scripture, and then what you're getting ready to talk about with character and calling. So I think just keep going, keep hammering away.
Okay. All right, dude. Well, so I think all of humanity, not just Christians, I think every human, unless there's some type of weird chemical brokenness through trauma or whatnot that's made this person an anomaly, I think every human is haunted by 2 questions and is filled with 2 yearnings that are, in parallel with those 2 questions. And question number 1 is, am I lovable? I mean, you're on the podcast today. When's the last time you wondered if somebody, if those closest to you really knew everything about you, like 100%, would they still like you? If the people that you work for, the people that work for you, or the investors in your company, if they knew the real you, would they bail on you? Like if you've ever had these weird dreams of being fully exposed and embarrassed and ashamed and all the pillars of your life just kind of fell down, then you have joined me and probably the rest of humanity, apart from those few, in living with this question, am I really lovable? Well, let me ask you the question, where'd that come from? It has nothing to do with whether or not you're a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu. You ask that question because you're human. Now, I'm going to come back in a second and say why. And I think Jesus has the answer, and I think it has everything to do with what I was talking about in John 10:10. But here's the second question. We live with the question, am I valuable? Will my life ever mean anything? Will I have a sense of legacy? Why do most people tend to yearn for some type of legacy? Why do we climb company ladders just to get to the top and realize it's not as cool up here as I thought? Because my question about whether I'm valuable still hasn't been answered, even though I can give you a monetary rate for which I'm valuable to my clients or my investors or whatever it is, but I can't answer the stupid question, with that set of data. What's the problem with that? So here's an ontological premise, right? I'm sorry to use big words. I'm around such, intelligent person here asking questions. I figured I could do that. There's that question that people have asked throughout the centuries of, if there's a yearning, there must be a filling for that yearning, or otherwise the yearning wouldn't exist. So I don't think I have to say anything more about that. So apparently, if I have this craving for loving and being loved, and I have this craving to make sure that my life actually can make a difference, or my life can bring value to the world or bring value to other people, that I can't quite satisfy, then it means at one point it was satisfied, and something happened that stripped that capacity away. So, and what Jesus says in John 10:10 is that the thief came and stole. I believe, okay, this is just me, but I believe that Jesus is saying the thief came and stole that which we're talking about. And if you don't buy that because of whatever reason, just hang on. Just give me a few moments here to consider this. And I believe he's pointing to what happened in the Garden of Eden. Because we all know, if you've read the story, Adam and Eve were naked and they had no problems. What does that mean? They just had, they were fully exposed and had no shame. They were fully living the life God intended. They were fully alive, to use the phrase in John 10:10. But then they were told that there was more fully available. And you just have to eat that apple, or that forbidden fruit. And us, being never satisfied with perfection even, apparently decided that was a good idea. So when they eat that forbidden fruit, and, whatever your take is on Genesis, whether it's poetry or figurative or descriptive of a historical narrative, it's really indifferent. I mean, let me take that back. I think the answer to that's important. You need to have a thought through answer to that. I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but my point is, regardless of your interpretation of that, you have to deal with the implications of that. Here's what happened, okay? Here's what happened. They ate the forbidden fruit, and they realized what? They were naked. They were exposed. And what did they do? They didn't worry about it. Life was like before. No, they hid. And it was so, the impact to Adam and Eve was so critical and so significant that God found it critical to slay an animal so that they could cover their nakedness and their shame. And we've been hiding ever since. So let's diagnose it a little bit more. What got broken? What got taken away?
Well, definitely identity, right?
Oh, for real? A sense of connection with God.
Yeah.
Which is the ultimate fulfillment of those things. God answers the question, am I lovable? And he says, yes, I love you. I made you. You're mine. It's like a parent loves a kid. I love you. Am I meaningful? Well, you're valuable because I made you, and then I proved through Jesus that I would buy you back, even if you were, not deserving of that. So you're more valuable than you probably think. You're more loved than you think. So he does answer those. That's an identity question. But here's what's kind of fun about that. Let me back up. Why did God create? What did God say to Adam and Eve right after they were created? He gave them some marching orders. What were they?
To be fruitful, multiply, rule the earth.
Yep. And when I read that, I used to think, okay, that's just what they're supposed to do. Then it starts to dawn on me over time, like I've been doing this for 30-something years now. It dawns on me that that's not just a description of what they're to do. It's a description of how they were made and what they were made for, right? Okay? So now we're getting down to, what's your essence? Well, a God who's a good God only asks you to do what he's created you to do. Be fruitful and multiply. That requires relationship. That requires a measure of intimacy. For Adam and Eve to physically do that, the intimacy it's like the most beautiful thing ever in the world. It's the picture of Jesus being reunited to his church. It's a husband and wife. That's intimacy, man. You are fully exposed in that type of experience. That's about as far as I'll go with that. But the intimacy that he's talking about isn't just between a husband and a wife. It's about people that work together on a team. It's about different leaders in the city working together for the betterment of the city. It's about countries trying to work together for the betterment of the world. And can you imagine a world that Jesus describes in John 17 that has a unity one with another like Jesus and the Father? I mean, like, that's ideal, guys. Be fruitful and multiply. Or be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful. That requires intimacy. So I'm going to stick with that word, intimacy. We were created for intimacy, which of course gets tied right into the am I lovable? If you were created for intimacy, if you were created to be fully exposed and still loved, to be fully exposed and no shame, if that's the way you are intended to live, but you live in a world where you can't fully expose because you're afraid that exposure would lead to rejection, and so therefore you have fig leaves on, then I'm not living to my full capacity, right? So created for intimacy, we've been tapped in our capacity by the enemy. Other side, I was made for, what was it you said? It would be fruitful and multiply and have dominion, okay? That's a horrible word, right? Why is it a horrible word? Because too many have taken this idea of dominion and done it for self-seeking purposes, nationalistic-seeking purposes. It's translated domination. Well, Jesus didn't come into the world to dominate the world.
Right.
But he did come into the world to dominate sin so that his people could actually fill the earth with his love and governance that leads to beauty and provision and protection and all the things that a good king does for his people. So be fruitful and multiply is intimacy. Have dominion is be my ambassadors. Be my representatives on the planet. God says, I created the planet, I put you on it, and you're in charge of it. You're the ambassadors, you're the managers, you're the influencers. And that's the word we like to use is that word influence. We were created for intimacy, be fruitful and multiply. We're created for influence, have dominion. All right?
Yeah, there are guys like me though that are super competitive, right? So I love it. So that dominating word, like dominating in my sphere of influence, dominating in business, dominating, and I'm starting a digital church, but that piece there obviously seems very connected to the impact that we're called to have.
Yeah, for real. And it's why we ask the question, am I valuable? Will my life make a difference? Will my life make an impact? Will I find my place in this world? If you're old enough to remember Michael W. Smith's song.
I actually do. So I was 6 years old when my dad had Go West Young Man. So for those of you that don't know, like church, like Christian culture, like I grew up as a PK, which is a preacher's kid, and I wasn't allowed to listen to non-Christian music until I, hid it from my parents when I was in middle school. And Michael W. Smith was like the crossover guy. So he did both. So I really enjoyed that. And Place in This World was his fourth album. But yeah, I was really young.
It was a single off of Go West, and it hit the top 10, I think, if not the top 25 on secular radio.
Yeah, on Billboard charts, if I remember correctly.
Billboard charts.
Yep.
It was huge. And I remember as being a 21-year-old laying in bed in college, just weeping because I couldn't answer that question. I didn't see how my life would ever be of any value, enough to be loved, enough to be married to, enough to really have a role to play in the world where I felt like I was worth the oxygen that I took up. So I believe all of us, whether we realize it consciously or just deal with it subconsciously, live with a really bad answer to am I lovable and am I valuable? And so that's what it just means to be human. So what does this have to do with Jesus? Okay, so Jesus comes and he didn't struggle with either of those questions. He was love, right? And everybody loved him except the self-righteous. Think about it. The tax collector Everybody hated him, but he was very eager to hear about Jesus. The prostitutes, everybody rejected them except the people that needed their services, which were the people that were self-righteous, most likely. So just kind of going there. But
Yeah, that hasn't changed in 2,000 years, has it?
it has not changed,
Nope.
sadly. So everybody loved Jesus because he was love, right? And it's still the people that are on this podcast that would probably be the most cynical of Jesus or church or Bible or any of that, would probably be cynical about the church and whatnot, but probably not about Jesus. What they read about him was pretty attractive. Why is that? Because he was pure love. And here's the other thing. He was also pure power, but not for himself. Here's the guy who could have called down, thousands of angels to protect him from everything that he went through. And he chose to not use the influence he had been given to serve himself, but to choose God and others. And isn't that the real trick, though? It's the same with love. It's not just that with influence. It's that with love. If I choose to serve my wife with my love, whether it be physical affection or lack thereof, or just getting her a hot tea without any other expectation, that's a beautiful thing. But us dudes, we're just not really good at that. I'll get you the hot tea with sugar and a special wafer, but I've got a self-serving motive there, right? So love and power can be used for just others, or they can be used for just us. Jesus came with a full capacity to love, and he didn't love to be loved. He loved to love. And he came with a full capacity of influence and used all of that power to serve God and others, to serve his purpose, but to not serve himself. And his voluntary submission to the cross was the ultimate evidence of that. So you get the second Adam coming into the planet, not with the thief, hadn't stolen, right, his intimacy and influence, like ours is stolen. And by the way, the Old Testament is a 2,000-year narrative of intimacy and influence gone bad. Just think about it. Cain and Abel, influence. Cain gets jealous, kills Abel. This isn't good. All the rape, all the, all this, the everything. Jesus comes, lives the life, dies, resurrected, sends his spirit to do what? He's been sent his spirit to change us, to remind us of the things that he said, to comfort us, to point us, to prompt us, but to actually do two categorical things in our lives. Now, this is where it gets really, really cool. So if you've checked out, check back in. The Spirit develops fruit in us. It says there's this thing called spiritual fruit that is really important. They're actually a list of the characteristics of Jesus to cultivate love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control, right? So if I am becoming more loving and joyful and peaceful and patient and kind and good and gentle and self-controlled, what happens to my relationship with Carol? What happens to my intimacy?
Well, it's like
What
when a
happens-
rising tide lifts all ships.
Dude.
Yeah. Gets better.
So as the Spirit of Jesus living in me actually helps me develop those fruit, and then the development of those fruit restores my intimacy. It's the Spirit who's actually helping me recover what was lost at creation.
Right. Yeah.
And then John 10:10 makes sense. It's the perfect little pivot point. The thief came to steal, kill, destroy. I came that you might have life and have it to the full. How do I have that life to the full? Because I signed a little card and I know I'm going to heaven? No, that's really not even relevant in where we live, except for it's my hope to continue to persist in this, taking up my cross and following him. But it's in the taking up in the cross and following him that I choose to obey and surrender and serve with my capacity and yearning for love, instead of take for my capacity of love. And that's when I actually bear that fruit and become more loving and joyful and peaceful and patient and kind. Intimacy goes up. But what's the other way the Spirit wants to change us? He deposits gifts. So Scripture says multiple places he deposits gifts into our life, and he chooses what those are. We know what those gifts are. They're teaching, leadership, administration, healing, mercy. There's multiple places in the New Testament where those are mentioned, and Old Testament. So everybody gets at least one.
So these are like superpowers that God is giving to the people that follow Jesus.
Yes, and some of them look normal, like teaching and stuff. But what God has told us about these spiritual gifts is that they're abilities that when you exercise, I join you and I multiply its impact. I'm a force multiplier of its impact. Perhaps you've sat in a church service before where the preacher's up there preaching, and they say something, and you know that it's like God speaking directly to you. You had that weird moment where you're like, is he in my house? Does he have a camera in my house? Does she have a camera in my, whatever it is, that's God taking a normal teaching gift, moving through that gift to force multiply it in your life and apply it to your life. That's God's Spirit working in His Spirit in you to do something bigger. And here's the full thing. He gives everybody that. So what's going up as I identify and develop and then start to optimize the use of my gifts, not for my benefit. I could use my gifts to become richer. I could use my gifts to have more influence or more cred in the business industry, whatever it is. And a lot of people do that. But what if our primary motivation was to use our gifts to just further the kingdom of Jesus in the world?
Yeah. So, but you just said something really interesting I want to hone in on. We can use this for like in other spheres of influence other than church. Like oftentimes when I hear about spiritual gifts, it's always about serving within the four walls of the church. But you're saying, oh, no. You can use them in every single sector, sphere of influence you're already in.
Yeah. Well, do we need those in the church walls and in the ministries of the church?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but the problem is, I think, is
I'm baiting you, Chester.
I know. You're trying to get me to get on my, high horse and preach. I don't need to do that, but like.
But here's where we're going. If the church needs it, how much more does the police department need it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and
if the church needs it, how much more does the education system need it?
That's a gosh darn
the military.
Aggravating part about all this is like we're supposed to be out there, and I think that's where like most of the leaders that we're talking to, like we want fulfillment. We know fulfillment is built and developed, but we're saying it's developed through intimacy with Jesus and these character pieces, but it's also calling, and we want to make an impact. And we're like, I can't make an impact just sitting there 1 hour a week. And so what does that look like moving forward, right?
Yeah, I would translate that to we're not making a difference by sitting there. The system that we're a part of is designed to get the results it's getting. And like we haven't even gone to disciple making yet, right? We haven't even started talking about disciple making. All you've asked me to do is unpack what does it mean to truly be human?
Well, and it's yeah, you're not wrong. But the problem is we're in this space that I don't think I've ever heard, and I'm guessing most of my listeners, like this isn't talked about in church, or if it's talked about, it's never acted upon. And so we're told like, hey, become a leader. Hey, have impact. Hey, become all you can be. And then it's like, while you're sitting in my chair, And so if that's the case, if that's what Jesus has called us to do, then yeah, Brian, let's start talking about what does it mean to become a disciple? Like, how do you do that?
Well, let's go back and summarize, right? Jesus came to give us, you said earlier, Brian, your theology of disciple making is character times calling equals impact. Let's associate that with everything that's just been said so far. Character is the fruit of the Spirit, defined very specifically, and you can actually measure that. That's kind of fun. You're real quick.
I'm really bad at it.
Yeah, you got 9 fruit of the Spirit. Rate yourself 1 to 10 on all 9. Am I loving? Okay, 5. Am I joyful?
Can I just? I'll help the audience here. When I did this with Brian, my fruit of the Spirit score was pretty darn low, and I'm a pastor, right? So I'm a leader of a church. It's not supposed to be that low, but I think it was like a 5.2, 5.3.
It's where most people land, and that's what's powerful. And we realize we can grow, and that's what's awesome. So anyway, intimacy. We were created for intimacy and influence, and we settled for, I'm just going to be blunt, sex and power. Right? And Jesus helps us restore that through his Holy Spirit, developing character and calling. So that's the tie. Created for intimacy and influence. We've settled for sex and power. And Satan wants to make sure we still do and stay that way. But Jesus came to send us his Spirit to develop character, fruit of the Spirit, and calling, gifts of the Spirit. And what I found, Chesley, when I started to disciple 10 years ago, focusing on the outcomes of character and calling, developing fruit of the Spirit and gifts of the Spirit, that made a radical, like 350% difference in the impact that Jesus had in people. Like he made them become different people. They literally became significantly different people. Wives were calling me and saying, I don't know what you're doing with my husband, but you may never stop. Like, this is your job from now on. You know, I finally am getting the guy I wanted. But it wasn't just an impact in them. This is the big part. It was an impact through them. And then as more and more started to do it, there was impact beyond, as relational networks started to happen and partnerships between different business leaders or different, pockets in the military, in the fire department and other people. They start coming alive in Christ in fruit and gifts, and then they start working together. And so the impact is internal, it's external, and then it's like in a more global sense as people start to carry this out beyond. So then let me come back to your question. Do we want to limit that to just the sphere of the local congregation? Or do you want to let the Holy Spirit define in people's lives what the tapestry, the capacity of the tapestry is, based upon the places and the people that they've put these disciples in? Man, that just sounds like it's a lot more potential for bringing the peace and the rule and the beauty and the justice of Jesus to the world than just trying to do it through the few programs a local congregation can pull out. They should keep doing those, and they should do them well. The things that we can do together like that are huge, but if to limit it to that, it doesn't make sense, because there's a lot of business owners and C-level people that have extraordinarily high capacity. That if we're saying, you got to do us preachers program over here, we've squeezed the funnel. Like there's a fire hydrant of power ready to come, and we're saying you can only have a little needle drop of that. So I think that would be a really bad mistake. So.
Yeah. So how do we, as leaders, how do we move people towards that place of impact in their lives?
Well, it's not good. Let's talk about how it won't work.
Okay.
More or better content will not do it.
So this is the last podcast for, no, I'm just playing. I'm just playing. No, this is good. Yeah. So what you're saying is content by itself doesn't work.
Right. We need the best content, but here's the point. Where content is absolutely necessary, it's absolutely inefficient or inadequate to accomplish it. Think about it. I mean, we got Right Now Media right now, right? You've got, what are some of the other big ones? Just take all the denominational content creation things and put them together with Right Now, with
all the seminaries, all the churches that are putting out sermons on Sundays. I mean, just go to YouTube. By itself, we have all the content we could ever need for anything, and yet we're not helping.
Still losing ground.
Yeah.
Content's not getting it done. It inspires, it unifies. There's so many valuable things. I'm not putting it down, but as long as we think that, oh man, I got to get a little thinner, and I've got to, get better hair color or whatever it is to just tweak the content and make it better, it's not going to get it done. So I can't stand it when people point at the problem and then don't give a solution. So I'm never going to be that guy.
Yes.
And I fought my whole life to innovate and to figure out if not that, then what, right? And then why not now? And why not me? To just start figuring this out. And so I knew that it had to be, the content couldn't be the focus. And the problem is, and you know this as well, people's primary question when it comes to disciple making environments like small groups or Sunday schools or whatever it is, the question is always, what are you studying? Like, if I'm going to get involved, what are you studying? What that means is content is king, and content is the deciding factor of whether or not I will join. You're going to tell me how to have a better marriage? The wife might say yes. The husband might say, I don't really, it's like everybody's making their choice based upon what you're going to study. Well, I don't want to study Romans, so I'm going to go do financial peace, or I don't want to do, so it's very content focused. So what we're trying to do is change the question from what are you studying to how will I be different? Well, let me ask you, Chesley, are you leading some type of a small group right now?
I was. Now I am getting all of our leaders hooked up in your program. So we are building the groundwork for that. Yeah. So good plug. There you go, Brian.
There you go. But if I was to ask a small group leader that was wanting me to join their group, like let's say we're having one of these big campaigns on a Sunday morning and go out and talk to your person. If I went out there and didn't ask them, what are you studying? And I asked them, how will my life be categorically different at the end of this 6-week journey? They're going to look at you like,
I don't know.
Well, you're going to know a few more people. Some will be your friends. Some you may never want to see again. I mean, there's some advantages that they could probably wrap off. But when it comes to character and calling and how they will incrementally be more loving and joyful and peaceful and patient and kind and gentle and self-controlled, and how they'll be able to know what their gifts are and use them more effectively in the kingdom and actually start to really walk into the answers of, am I lovable and am I meaningful? There's nothing there. So you can use whatever content you want, but the language we use is you have to be outcome focused. You have to be focused, ridiculously, uncompromisingly committed to those two outcomes. Why am I studying Romans? Not to get smarter in Romans, but to learn from Romans. Not just what did Paul say, but what did Jesus say to me about how I need to shape my life right now and develop in character and calling in the process. Yeah. Outcome focused.
That's so good. One of the things I keep thinking, and I know you're walking us through a system, and we have talked about calling, as in discovering how God has gifted and wired you, and being able to utilize that. So most of the people that I hang around that are high octane leaders, they know how they're wired. They know the gifts that God have given in their lives. Maybe they don't have a theological construct around that like we do. But context, like when we've talked about, you could serve in the local church, the context has always been the four walls. And that's not appealing to most of the guys that I lead, to be honest with you. They want to change the world, not build a building. And so how do we discover context in all of this? Like, not just what we're good at, but where we should apply what we're good at.
Yeah, so my cheat in our Disciples Made experiences for that is, we're developing, everybody needs to first identify what those gifts are. And like you said, a lot of your high performers already have that. They don't just take spiritual gift assessments. They're leveraging strength finders. They're leveraging, all these high profile, high expensive, the whole deal. Yeah. They learn to hire and fire by those things, etc. So, they know that. So when I have people start talking specifically about spiritual gifts, or APES, which is like a different type of profiling, self-awareness generation thing, and spiritual conversations, I don't ask them, how does this shape how you're going to live in the four walls? I just ask, how's this change how you're going to lead in your family first, your work second, and your church third? Because really, I think Jesus gave us those in that order. It's Jesus, others, and yourself is how you get joy, right? To go back to that old acrostic. But I think Jesus wants to be most pronounced in your family, And then in the place where you spend most of your time in the world and in your church, which is not the full expression of the kingdom. It's just a gathering of the kingdom people on a regular basis for worship and encouragement, which is a different definition of ecclesiology to me. I am the church. I don't go to church. And that one statement right there could just flip everything. There's companies like this. Coca-Cola bottling company out in Charlotte. Check it out. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but they see themselves as preachers at the CEO level, and their congregation that they invest in, that they serve, isn't the place where they go with other believers on Sunday morning to worship the risen King and to hear a message about him, to reinforce their faith and whatnot. They would say that their primary church is where they are the pastors and the priests and the kings, the representation of Jesus, where they work. So that's my cheat inside of Disciples Made. How do these gifts and how do all these leadership competencies actually help you change how you lead your family, how you lead your workplace, and how you lead in your church?
So you're already saying, hey, where do you live, work, play, learn, right? And so that is the context. God's already got you there. That's the context you begin in.
Yep.
So usually if you're in the wrong context, it's usually because you are misinterpreting what you're good at, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, there's a piece of that, but the thing that's hitting me the most is if we don't ask the family and the work questions, and we only ask about the spiritual investment or the investment the Spirit has made in their life by depositing those gifts, if we only want to use them in the church setting, which that's not what church leaders are saying, but
right.
Just to continue to make the point, I believe, like, I want to be fair.
Yeah, and I want to have that disclaimer too. I'm a pastor, right? So I lead a church.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to harp on the fact that we are as church leaders, we just want you to sit in our chairs, but that's what I feel like the perception is.
Well, okay. So so let's, now that we've kind of said we want to be fair, let's also be real. I was a guy who ran all the systems from first time guest to reproducing disciples. So I needed volunteers to do that, right? So I wanted to find the best volunteers, and I wanted to help them discover their gifts, and I wanted them to serve with the optimal thing in my areas, because it was my job to make those areas thrive. I failed if I didn't get them. I won if I did. So I had to get them, right? So it's like that's the structure is set up to make us want to do that. My challenge came, Chesley, when you know this story, so you're going to hear this again, but laugh and make it sound like it's the first time, so that all your listeners will be really impressed and all. So I remember I set out Disciples Made actually started with me trying to make more and better small group leaders. And the problem is, it's this frustrating thing. When I started to develop character and calling, like intentionally, to make better small group leaders, you know what I found out? All their character went up and all their calling went up. But the problem with their calling going up is that they realized, I dig small groups, but man, I kind of want to go over here and help end the unemployment challenge for those on an autism scale.
Yeah. You're like, I don't have a box for that or a program.
Well, I just invested a year of my life into you, and now you're going to go do something else for somebody else? And I was stuck where every church leader is going to be stuck in this. Did I do this to build my stuff, or did I do this to build Jesus stuff? Are these my volunteers, or are they Jesus missionaries in training?
Yeah, and for those of you that are church leaders, now you're getting to see the pulling back of the curtain of us church leaders and going, hey, we are like you in the nonprofit space, trying to build a business and an organization. And so we're dealing with these questions. To be successful, you got to grow. And yet every time we grow and do the things God wants us to do, there's a sending capacity. And you guys need that. We know you guys need that. And so, but there's this insecurity piece for us church leaders. If we don't got you and we're not connected to you, well, then maybe our impact, our influence, and even our paychecks will be dinged because of it. And so I know I've fought that same struggle.
Yeah. Well, there's, I think insecurity is a major component to that. Other emotional things that come along with that Jesus wants to, help us grow into. But I think the bigger trick is, like, there's a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset. And most not-for-profits aren't looking around going, I've got too much money. What am I going to do with it?
Right.
Or I've got too many volunteers. What am I going to do with it? We don't have the coercion of the paycheck. And what I mean by that is we don't have the motivation to inspire people. Like, perform well and you get paid. Like, perform well and you might go away. Like, that's where everything else in the world says invest in that which will bring a return, right? And so, but really that's a closed fist posture. I'll invest in you as long as the ROI comes back. And man, I don't want to invest in, like, with my mutual funds and things like that. I don't want them throwing money into stuff that's going to go away. So it makes sense, right? It really does make sense. But what Jesus came to say was, if you do this, you're going to lose everything. But if you do this, you'll gain everything. That is the exact, those economics don't work down here.
So what you're saying is Jesus didn't know what he was talking about? No, I'm just playing.
In our world, well, I think he did. I mean, obviously you know this. If you've read Dallas Willard, he talks in the Divine Conspiracy, he talks about we're flying upside down and think we're right side up. And Jesus came into our upside down world right side up, and we thought he was upside down. But it wasn't him being upside down, it was us and thinking we were right side up. He's like, Jesus had it figured out. Just pay attention. Do this. Hold on to your volunteers like this at your church. And what will happen?
Yeah, they all get burnt out. They all get frustrated. Yeah, it's a big deal.
And high capacity leaders won't do it because they don't like being used.
Yes, it's true.
They're used to, I just said something a little too dark. Yeah. But they'll see it. They're like, nope, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But if you have this posture, wow, so much can be done. And we saw some huge results of having that. We actually, I think I might have told your team when you were here that I was in, part of one of the departments of mine was the First Impressions. And First Impressions director is still a very good friend. She's still on staff there. We actually created a measurable of what percent of our attrition of volunteers was actually due to them taking a next step in their personal calling. How many people did we graduate up?
Wow. And I am trying to reach out to entrepreneurs and marketplace leaders, but if you're a church leader listening to this, our metrics in church are wrong anyways. We're budgets, butts, and buildings. And I think this gives us an opportunity to really change what we see as success. And you said you've got measurements for it already. That's amazing.
Yeah, that one was fun. Like, what is the goal of First Impressions? Well, there's a stated goal, and then there's a goal behind the goal. And the stated goal, of course, is to help guests have an extraordinary experience on their first and second visit to make them want to come and stay, right? Perfect. That's a customer acquisition process, or what do you call that? Assimilation process, right? So that makes sense. But what if it was more than that? That's what it is for our guests, but what is it for our volunteers? To me, the First Impressions department was simply a way for people to get stuck relationally and begin to be discipled intentionally. So it's almost just like a step along a journey, a relational journey, for people to walk into a disciple-making relationship that might graduate them up in our influence. It's like you can just be a greeter or a person in the parking lot, or you could be a team leader. Or you could be like we've got multiple services. You could be the team leader over this whole service. We can graduate you up within our department, or we could graduate you out. I'm more interested in kids ministry. Well, let me connect you with our middle school director if you're passionate about middle schoolers. So it becomes these people are assets to steward. in order to help them grow. It's that Home Depot thing. It's not like we're saying we can do this and you can help. It's you've got a life and you can leverage this volunteer role to help you walk into that.
Yeah, so there is a role for churches in all of this, that they can leverage these moments of clarity for greater impact to help people find the right context using their gifts. So there's an ability for all of us to win. So in the last couple minutes that we have left, I would really love for you to go into on a 30,000 foot view level. I know you've really laid the groundwork, but what is Disciples Made?
Disciples Made is a not-for-profit ministry that provides tools, like web-based tools. You pay a subscription, you get access to 4 small group-sized type of we call them intentional disciple-making environments. So we provide those tools that you can subscribe to, and we provide the coaching and the support to help you optimize the use of those tools to multiply disciples in your church context. That's the 30,000 foot view.
It's very succinct. It's really good. Really good.
I've been working on it a long time. As you can tell, I'm quite verbose. I'm a preacher.
I know. I got the same problem. Diarrhea of the mouth. I think that's what most of my friends call it. So yeah. Yep. So obviously, as a church, so we're getting ready to start a new church that's digital first. So it's not bound by geography. And our goal was to develop leaders. And that's what we want to do. And we believe Brian's system is really the missing link for most churches. I guarantee you some churches are doing a really good job of it. I've not been to those churches. And I've worked in them, and I'm like, man, I would love for business leaders and artists, creatives, innovators to feel like they're getting a handle on the theological concepts of Christianity, which you do well, in a way that is challenging and riveting, and then it will also help move you into a place of maximum impact. And I think, Brian, your system is the best I've ever seen in my decade of ministry. But I'm excited because that really means you're going to put me out of a job. So when I'm getting other people ready, well, honestly, even through this system, I'm realizing like, okay, my gifting is communication. My gifting is getting people into a room. My gifting is innovating new things. It's not management. And so obviously you can't manage a thing without wanting to control it if you're a leader like me. And so obviously I've got to move to a different.
Let me disagree with you.
Okay. Yep. This is great. Right, so I get free therapy. This is awesome.
Yeah. You're an innovator, right?
Yeah.
Your gifts are going to be your gifts forever. And one of your biggest ones is being able to adapt and use your gifts to whatever context you need, right?
Yeah.
Here's your problem. You don't know what the next hill requires. True. You just know that when you get there, you'll be able to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, your communication gift might be used now to rally 400, 600, 800, whatever your church is. Doesn't really matter. Everybody has a kind of a lid as to how far they can go. But what if that church actually starts to multiply disciples, and you're now using your communication to do videos that help train thousands of people to disciple tens of thousands?
Yeah.
Same gifts.
Yeah.
Just a different level
context.
Of responsibility. Yeah. And here's why I said I love the idea of you working yourself out of a job. You're not working yourself out of a job. You're just working yourself out of your current job.
That's fair. Yeah.
People that are faithful with doing the right thing in the present usually are capable of doing the next right thing in the future.
That's good. That'll preach.
And entrepreneurs can figure it out.
Yeah.
The people that are afraid of that, if that they want maintenance instead of mission, will settle for structures that they can maintain, and that's when the decrease starts. Mm-hmm. I didn't set out to create Disciples Made. I just simply set out to multiply my one group into 5 because Jesus told me that's what the plan was.
Yeah.
And now we've got 7,000 people in our wake, and the bell curve is just, or the hockey stick is just starting to really expand as our technology is caught up with our practices, and we're able to make this scale with, you know, a more solid business to support it. So
yeah, it's so great. So for those of you out there listening that want to be a part of this, like you can reach out to me or Brian. Brian, where would they find you?
Go check us out at disciplesmade.com. You can see the essence of what we do there. The best thing to do is just ask for a 30-minute, hey, I want to connect with you and learn more about it. I saw your stuff on the wall, followers made, leaders made, and then the more incarnational expressions of what we do for those that really do find that they're missionaries and have to ask the question, how do I become more effective? Yeah. Where I live, work, learn, and play. That's what those are. But how do you do all that? Just ask for a 30-minute call. You'll get one of us or one of our coaches. And we'll just basically, here's our plan for you. What are your dreams? What's our DNA overlap? I mean, if you're really about the business that we can help you solve, we're going to give you some options about how we can come alongside of you and help you do that based upon who you are and what your dreams are.
That's amazing. Man, I appreciate this time with you, man. I'm excited to see what Disciples Made's going to do, and I'm excited to see how many people are going to be a part of this new movement of real leadership that are going to work in their context. So we appreciate everything that you're doing for us, man.
Oh, it's been a pleasure meeting you. I remember on that call with Jeff Reed, there's this guy that just kept asking questions. Hey. And I'm like, I like that Chesley guy. And in fact, Mitch, our COO that you've now had the privilege of meeting, he's like, yeah, we need to talk more to that guy. I think there's a DNA overlap. I said, I think you're right.
Yep, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I really enjoyed it. So thank you very much, man. Man, thank you, Brian. I love his insights about character and calling. I remember the first time I heard it. It was just an amazing treatise on what God has for each and every one of us who believe. I hope that excited you as much as it excited me. Hey, every episode I do a soapbox or hot read. Now, today we are doing our first hot read, and if you don't remember, Peyton Jones, he's on episode 2. I had an amazing interview with Peyton. Him and I share DC comic book love, especially Batman, and he wrote a book called Church Plantology. Well, it is a big book. We're talking 400 plus pages of just dense, theological, fun works talking about the art and science of church planting. So Church Plantology, the art and science of planting churches. It's beautifully written. It is well thought through. He talks about Paul. Some of the things that I didn't even realize as I'm reading through the New Testament, he actually works through Paul's missionary journeys and literally dissects them. He puts them in a chronological order for us, and he even starts showing the human sides of what Paul was going through each different journey, and how actually, who knew? Paul actually messed up on his first missionary journey. You don't think about that when you actually read Acts, but he actually talks about how he messed up, what he learned, and how he fixed it the second time he went. And there was fights along the way and how that worked. And then obviously Peyton is very, he's a pro at church planting, man. So he talks about his experience in Wales, and he talks about his experience on helping others in America plant churches. And if you are excited or thinking about what it would look like to become a missionary in your context, at your job, at your place of work, where you live, work, learn, and play, right? I got this favorite coffee shop of mine called Black Rock Coffee. I go there every day. I follow the Luke 10 rhythms that Jesus set for us. And Peyton talks about that. And he talks about planting the gospel in a place and letting the Holy Spirit do its work. And then the church kind of emerges from that. We don't do much work. We just kind of watch it go. So we might plant, we might water, but God produces the increase. And Peyton talks about that through the book. If you want a masterclass on church planting, this is the book for you. So definitely check it out. Hey, next week we have Jesse Ross from Dream Wide and Go Be. I love Jesse's story, and I know you will too. I can't wait for you to hear him and hear the message he has to stop dreaming big and dream wide. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe and like the video. If you're listening, please subscribe or follow our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. And don't forget to rate and review us. remember that it is up to you to develop fulfillment, because there is a world out there that needs you, and fulfilled leaders fill the world with hope.
Well, I am glad you stuck with us all the way through the episode. Hey, there's a book he mentioned. It means Find Your Place. It's a book that Brian wrote. You should check it out. It's to help empower you to live the life that God has always wanted for you. You have gifts and abilities, and he wants you to deploy those for the good of his kingdom. And Find Your Place does that. Also, the book Church Plantology I just reviewed. Check that out on Amazon, and also check out the podcast I had with Peyton earlier talking about church plantology. If you are thinking about what it looks like to be a missionary in today's context, that is the best book I have ever read for that purpose. Hey, next week we are getting ready to talk to Jesse Ross. He has built a few nonprofits and he's doing amazing things in his community. He's making a great impact, doing some things for veterans, doing some things for volunteerism that even Stanford had a little bit of stuff to do with. We have a great conversation with him. I can't wait for you to hear what he has to say about making an impact in your community. Hey, thank you for listening to our interview today. We're so excited to be able to bring these to you weekly. If you'd like to stay up to date on our blogs, on our podcasts, even some of our social media, or if you would like to say hi to me, you can reach out to us at 480-531-9015. Again, that's 480-531-9015. We know that when leaders develop fulfillment in their own lives, that they begin to develop fulfillment in others. And when fulfilled leaders lead, they lead and develop hope. And the world needs a lot more hope. So here's the deal. We would love to see you next week, and let's lead full together.